Hey, this is Matt Bell. I'm the driver of the number 51 APR Audi R8 LMS Grand Am, and I was just going to give you a little tour of our car. So the R8 LMS is the base car for the Grand Am model. It's actually, as per the rules in the LMS series and in WC and everywhere else, it actually is based on the street car. It actually has a street aluminum frame underneath it, has the same 5.2 liter V10 behind the driver's seat, and actually has the same transmission as the Rtronic V10 R8. So the engine is the 5.2 liter V10. It is street derived. It makes I've actually been told it makes a little bit less power than the street car to compete in our series. It's heavily restricted so that it's not really running away from the pack. It's a little bit less power than the GT3 spec car that this car is actually built for. It is a very torquey motor. It's a very flat power curve, which is really great for us to use. Very easy car to drive. It's not peaky. It's not trying to light up the tire all the time, especially with the right tune on it. The transmission itself is, as far as the case is concerned, and most of the internal components is an Rtronic 6-speed that you get on the street R8. The shifting is managed by a Magneti Marelli system, the same as the Indy cars. The clutch is a small 5-inch clutch that is easy to wear out, so you'll likely have noticed a lot of the cars in the 24-hour really taking it easy, trying to leave pit lane. We don't want to wear that clutch out. In fact, I was told that clutch has exactly 24 starts in it before it starts to overheat the little clutch fingers. It's not really a bad feature of the car. It's just made to be very exact in its weights and its materials and all that. The car shifts very fast. You shift it without the clutch, just as the Rtronic, except it's not actually engaging the clutch between shifts. What it's doing is actually finding neutral between the shifts, letting the gear or the revs drop, and then it falls into the next gear. And on upshifts or downshifts, it actually blips the engine as well. Very well, actually. It leased as well as the street car did. So they've done a great job with that. The suspension components are actually straight from the street car, with the exception of the dampers, the springs, and the sway bars. The geometry is almost identical. I think we're allowed to change a couple small things that essentially just allow the car to more naturally drive or run as slow or as low as it is to the ground. The brakes on the car are the Brembo racing model brakes. This car brakes quite well. Usually the benchmark in braking in the series is that Pratt & Miller Camaro, and I'd say this car is braking at all the same points that did and still does. So that's a huge accomplishment to say that you're at least one of the best braking cars. And that much overhead in braking means we can actually save our brakes a little bit in the race, and that's really going to be something important for the 24-hour, where a pit stop to change brakes can actually usually be about 2 minutes. So a 2-minute stop in pit lane can oftentimes be, depending on if it's a caution lap or where you are in the field, and in the combination of those two things, that could put you a lap down. So for a lot of cars, a brake change is going to be putting them a lap down and possibly ruining their race. So the longer we can go on a brake package, the better we're going to be in the long run. The interior of the car shares a dashboard with the R8 street car, and that's about it. And actually, there's a few other funny little components that they've literally just brought over because it ties into the CAN bus system, like the dimmer knob, and actually the shift paddles are from the standard street car R8. But there are the car has less buttons in it than the street car does. It has less vents in it than the street car does, and it has twice as many screens in it than the street car does. We basically have a radio button on the steering wheel and a drink button on the steering wheel that pumps some cold ice water into our helmet so that we can take a drink. The buttons and the switches down on the center console are mostly, they're very important pieces. It's a start button and an ignition switch and a main power. There's also a number of other things like wipers and defog up on the dashboard itself, but there's not a whole lot that we need to play with on an everyday or kind of a lap-by-lap basis. The other two interesting switches that again are stock components are the headlight stock and the cruise control stock. And believe it or not, the cruise control is actually what we're using to limit the car in pit lane, and they've actually done a great job. It essentially has a traction control system, the completely legal traction control system that helps the car get out, or a torque limiting system really, to help the car get out of pit lane when it's on new tires. And that's what that lower red small stock is, where the cruise control would normally be. We push that lever forward to engage the pit limiter. We pull it back to disengage the pit limiter, and the pit limiter only works in first gear. Again, as a safety measure, in case that lever gets stuck forward or anything like that, we can actually still run on the track until we're back down in first gear. The car has a full set of headlights and taillights. It actually also has turn signals, so if something's gone wrong and we have a bunch of GT cars hustling up behind us, we can either go the European way and point them to the side we want them to pass. We can do it the American way and point them to the side that we're moving. There's Americans and Europeans in the field, so it really won't do that much for us. The high beam position is actually how we turn on and off our headlights. So we can actually turn on turn off the headlights by putting it on the high beam mode. If our radio loses communication, that's actually a way that we'll be able to communicate with the pit lane, telling that we acknowledge that they're asking us in, or acknowledging that we need to stay out, or anything else they're telling us. The screen right in front of us is the new Bosch DDU8. It's actually a full computer screen. It's full functional computer. It does everything we need it to do, to be honest. Actually, I don't remember how many modes it has. I know the GT3 car has functionality in all the modes, but as per the rules of this series, we had to remove our rear wheel speed sensors, which means a lot of those pages show a fault, so we don't really use those. But it does show us, we can actually move all the lights around, or all the different messages on the screen around, so that it's a little more important to us. So things like the lockup lights, it actually shows us which side of the car is locking up a brake, if we're just locking up one or locking up two. It's a very, very good system. It'll also tell us to do things like use the clutch to shift if we've lost the pump in the gearbox, or the pump's a little bit slow. Another item that you might have noticed is that large plug on the left side of the steering wheel on the dashboard below the dimmer switch. And what that is actually a radio, transponder, and water pipe. We plug our helmet into that. It's just one plug that kind of clips into all those things. That connects us to the water system, or the drinking water system in the car, so we can have a drink while we're driving, as I said earlier, using the drink button. The radio plug is that large female plug, or sorry, the male plug on there. That's obviously our communication back and forth with the pit lane. The radio is to our right on the center console, and then the transponder, the driver ID, is basically telling Grand Am and the pit lane which driver's in the car. So we each have a different resistor in our helmet itself that kind of keys in with the radio and tells them which driver's in the car. So the exterior of the car, you'll notice, shares a few components with the street car, but things like that large radiator vent, and obviously the wing and the diffuser are all new. All those are to give the car as much downforce as possible while keeping it as slippery as possible. And a lot of these components have kind of fed over from the GT3 series, which actually allows a lot more things like little winglets and extra flaps and little canard spoilers that would actually help our drag in some situations. The wing is also better placed in the GT3 car as per the rules. So really, some of these aerodynamic features don't help but hurt us. Some of the features that do help, for instance, the little gap behind the fender on the front tire, that's actually something that previously Grand Am didn't let incorporate into the cars. So some of the older cars, like the old Corvette and the old Camaro, don't have those because they simply weren't allowed to have them. What we do have is a very short front splitter to limit our front downforce, but really to no avail. The front downforce is actually very good in this car thanks to that large radiator vent. It takes in from the bottom vent that has, or the bottom inlet that has the screen on it, and pumps it out through the top of the hood, and that actually creates a large amount of downforce. And the other thing that does is all that energized air from the radiator actually sticks to the roof of the car really well and flows into the or underneath the wing. The other thing that really helps with that are those louvers on the rear hatch. That's taking a lot of heat from the engine and energizing the air to help it really go up under the wing instead of just up into the air. There are brake ducts on the front and on the rear. those rear blades that are normally used for they're mostly aesthetic on the street car. That's actually our inlets for our engine on one side, and the other side is a bunch of oil coolers and other radiators for things like the power steering system and the transmission itself. So those are actually completely functional, and those outlets are also very important. You'll notice that some of the normal outlets on those standard R8 aren't there. It's because we want to keep the outlet of that hot air in a very specific location, and again, that energized air can kind of blow away some of the draft that we would normally have on the back side of the car. The shape of the car is the same as the standard R8, but that wings kind of ruin it for us. It is very high and very far back, and that's good and bad. The problem with the wing being so far back is that it actually creates a lever arm, so adjustments done on that wing, where if it was right over the trunk, if you made a small adjustment to it, it really wouldn't do all that much. So you kind of have a finer adjustment, but it's very coarse adjustment when we have to have that lever arm attached to it, because now when we go one click on that wing or a couple degree on that wing, it acts like we're going 8 or 9 degrees on the wing. Another thing you'll notice that really helps the front downforce of the car, or at least the front aerodynamics of the car, are those louvers on the fender. And the R8's normal shape with those big bubble fenders is actually very beneficial for us, because it means we can have a horizontal surface, or a flat surface, that we can vent some of that hot air out of, or not even just hot air, but that very high pressure air that's building up in the fenders. That not only reduces drag, but it also really pushes the front of the car down. In fact, on the Daytona prototypes, that's one of their key ways that they increase or decrease their front downforce and their front drag, is by opening or closing those louvers. Our louvers aren't adjustable, but the size of those louvers, how many louvers there are, was very specifically designed by Audi, and it shouldn't be affected by the series itself.